condemned in 1904 or thereabouts. A new winding engine was purchased by the museum, which is a modern winding engine. It doesn't need an engine house, it just needs a shed around it.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that they used in all the collieries and so on. And it was bought new in 1906 or 8, I think, this one from Holman's in Cornwall, engineering company. And it stayed here until the early part of the war, when it was commandeered to go and work at a tungsten mine up in Cornwall. Tungsten during the war was not obtainable from anywhere friendly, and we had to mine it ourselves. Tungsten was a very hard, heavy metal, very, very strong, used for cutting tools in the metal machining industries. Also in wartime it was used for the piercing end of armour piercing shells.
Oh, okay.
And it was also used for searchlight bulb filaments, and they used them on those. So this engine went up to Castle and Dinus mine. It then went to a clay pit in St Austell where it dragged things around using wire ropes. Then it went to a mining museum over near Helston called Poldark Mine.
Oh, right, okay.
Anyway, it's all been sort of restored, and we can run it for a little bit for you on compressed air.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, I know. So get them. So he's going to start it up. That should be interesting. Yeah. There's that chair.
there's a chair for you there. Right. Are you okay there?
Yes, yeah.
Good.
That chair.
Right, the winding engine's got two drums,
Right.
and the right-hand drum had the cable wound under the drum,
Right.
so that and it went out to the pit headgear through the right-hand slot in the wall.
Okay. Oh, yes.
The other drum had the wire wound over the top and went through the slot in the wall at the top.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
they
can see
both
that.
went over the pit headgear,
Yeah.
one unwound while the other wound. So you were balancing the load in the mine shaft as much as you could.
Yeah.
There'd be wire rope wound round the drums, and there would probably be the best part of a ton of wire on each drum. So you've got quite a bit of balance, and it was significant in comparison with the amount of the weight of ore that you were bringing up.
Right.
It's worked by compressed air. The engine man would sit
Sit
there.
here. Oh, he sat where I'm sitting.
He sits where he's sitting. He's got his instructions here. He's got bell signals from down the mine for what he's to do. Raise. One is raise. Two is stop it. Three is let it down. Three is men wait with people getting into the cage. If they're on board, two followed by two, lower slowly, raise slowly. So this would all be on pull cords down the mine. Electricity and mines would not have a company. So that would be on a pull cord all the way down the mine. So you get that sort of signal.
Yeah.
He would be here on a 12-hour shift.
Oh,
He
okay.
wouldn't be allowed to leave his post. He'd probably need a pot for emergency.
Well, I would have thought so, wouldn't you?
That was usual. So it went on. Anyway, the fact that the wire ropes would wear and stretch in use meant that the dial indicators, one for each drum, which were driven by the drum, they don't have a calibrated dial. The engine man has to put a chalk mark as to where the various levels where he's got to pick up or leave loads.
Right.
Because the wire rope is going to change in length. It'll change in length between a hot day and a cold day. It'll change in length.
That must have been a bit awkward at times.
So he would have to wait until he got a signal.
Right.
Saying,
That's there.
Stop now.
Yeah.
And he would make his mark and he'd say, that is at the such and such a level in the mine. And he'd know from, and he'd probably have to renew his marks every couple of days.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's working on compressed air at the moment. We've got some, so
good.
I'll start it up. It clappers a bit.
Right. Brilliant. Thanks very much for that demonstration. Brilliant.
There we are. So that's 100 and something years old. That engine, and it was a typical mining engine. That's probably as noisy as you get. The other things that went on in the mine, like stamping the ore, were much noisier.
You can imagine the engine sitting there and listening to that, or
well, he's only operating it intermittently because they're drilling and blasting.
That's true. They're going to be doing that all the time.
They're busy most of the day. In case something goes wrong. When they may need to come out very urgently. It says, it says continuous ringing of the bell means there's been an accident.
Oh, okay.
In later days, apparently, when they had compressed air down the mine for the compressed air drills that were looked in, the other emergency signal was putting eucalyptus on. Anyone who was using compressed air down the mine would smelt eucalyptus oil. As a signal from
right. Oh, okay. Clever, isn't it?
We'll go down the steps now.
Right. It's quite steep, isn't it?
It is steep. There are two good handrails.
Yeah.
Shall I? I'll tell you what. If you wait down the bottom, I'll take your wife round, and we'll come in from the other end.
Okay.
If you wait down the bottom of the steps.
Yeah. I'm just going to have a quick look anyway, Neil. Oh, look, this is that vibrating table, look. So we're at the King Edward mine, and this is all the machinery we've been shown around by lovely Marcus. This old boy who knows his stuff.
I think that's what the rest of new.
Years ago, they get tin out of it and everything else.
It's all of it. And there's only 1% of the whole thing.
Obviously was.
This is obviously the workshop.
Not anymore.
Oh, yeah, the workshop.
This is our workshop where they obviously repair everything.
Yeah.
I won't go in.
No.
She could come down the stairs.
Oh, Marcus, right.
Yeah, so we're just waiting for him.
Just wait, he said to wait at the end of the stairs.
Yes, he'll be back. Yeah, he's just coming now.
Okay, thank you.
Here we are. Right, now the stamps. These are what's called California stamps, and they're power driven, and they comprise 5 spindles with 800 weight hammers on the end of them, and they look like this one.
Oh, okay.
So that's a real one. That's a real one. That's the hammer head,
Yeah.
and that's lifted up and down by a rotating cam in the machine, and that lifts and drops 60 times a minute.
Wow.
And at the end at the head of the stamp, there is one of these shoes which goes on it, and that's the wear piece.
That's the way.
That will last a little while. You're stamping very hard abrasive rock, and you're reducing it from 1 inches down to about 0.6 of a millimetre. The early stamping machines were what's called Cornish stamps, and we've got a model of them here, water wheel driven, lifting 6 heads of stamps. That's the real bit of bit of metal
Yeah.
that would do it, and that's a real head of stamps.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
you've got the heavy metal, the heavy iron weights at the bottom, and the steel shanks, which are rectangular, and so these don't rotate. They wear, and they wear irregularly, with the stuff coming out from underneath them, wears them away, and they would last. One of those heavy cast iron heads would apparently last about a fortnight.
Okay, wow.
When the fortnight was up and you needed one head replacing, you had to stop the whole bag and shoot, and take it all apart, put a new one in. You lost a day's work.
Yes.
The California stamp was different. That was a heavy head with a detachable shoe at the end of it. It was lifted by a rotating cam wheel,
Right.
which went onto this lifting collar
Yeah.
at the stem. As it lifted, it rotated it, so it wore totally evenly.
Evenly.
And you could change the head by simply
Detaching.
Detaching the bottom
pin
bit.
that held
Yeah.
it in place, putting a new one in. You'd be back up and running in 20 minutes.
So that was definitely a vast
Much
improvement.
quicker, vast improvement.
Yeah.
than a whole
Vast
day on-
improvement. This was the sort of thing that they invented for the California goldfield.
Yes.
Now, what we're looking for here is various rocks. Here we are. We've got, that's a copper. That's copper. That's granite, and that's a very bit of concentrated tin ore. If you feel the difference between those two, that's what we're trying to separate out.
Can I hold that onto that?
And we're turning that into sand.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a definitely different weight.
There's two very different weights there.
Oh, God.
Two very similar sized pieces.
And this is the...
That's tin ore, and that's
Sorry?
granite.
Bent it down to the...
Yeah.
And what we're doing is we're hammering these into a sand. They're all combined together in the rock. We're hammering them into a sand, and we are aiming to get coarse sand, which is like you get on the beach, really. Getting coarse sand like that, just like beach sand, which is one of the products. It all comes out willy-nilly from the machine.
Yeah.
We've got fine sand, which is like that. That's a fairly fine powder. And because everything is mixed with water, the last grade that comes out is referred to as slime because it's like clay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's the wrong
Wrong
one.
one. There it is, fine slime, isn't it?
Fine slime, yeah. And that would be fine slime. That's about sort of consistency of face powder or something, or makeup or
Amazing,
some
isn't it?
such. So
Yeah.
you get the three, and what's happening is everything is being transported by water, and what we've got to try and do is where we've got coarse sand, fine sand, and slimes all in water, and we shake
Just
them
shake
up.
it. Okay.
We shake them up, and if we put them down there, the coarse will settle out quickly, the fine will settle out gradually,
Yeah.
and the fine
takes
slime
time.
will settle out eventually. And what we have to do, because we want to process this one quite quickly, that one at a medium speed, and that one can only be treated very slowly, we want to separate the three grades, and that's done with what we call a hydraulic separator.
Right.
Everything is passed through a water system, and there are 1, 2, 3 tapered buckets,
Yeah.
effectively, with a water supply putting a jet up the middle of each one. And what happens is you put all the sand into the first one with a fairly powerful jet, which will lift all but the coarse sand.
Right.
The fine sand and the slimes go off into the next two,
Yeah.
where there are weaker jets,
Yeah.
and you separate them out
That way. Yeah, clever. Yeah.
So it's a separation process
Yeah,
by sort of floating the big stuff
That's
in
it,
a heavy jet, in a strong jet, and letting a jet that's strong enough to lift everything but the big stuff, and so on, and carrying on down the scale until
Yeah.
you've got them all ready to go. We transport everything using water, and we have a water supply system which puts the water into the stamps, and we collect rainwater and things down here. We have a sump, we have a wheel here, a dipper wheel with buckets on it, that rotates and lifts the water from our sump here right the way around the system, and it all flows from A to B.
So it's
in
like a water wheel thing, basically.
It's a water wheel driven backwards.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Anyway, we'll start all that up, and then we've got a thing called a huss table or a shaking table here, which I will demonstrate in a minute or two. That is used for separating the coarse sand from the tin ore that's in the coarse sand. And we can show you this contraption working because it's a bit unusual. This is old-fashioned lino,
Yeah.
and it's all slightly sloping, and it's all
Yeah, I
driven
see
by an
that.
electric motor,
Yeah.
and it vibrates.
Right.
I'll get the water running right.
Brilliant.
on the
Thank you.
system first.
That's giving me, I'm running out of battery. It's giving me more battery.
Very good.
It's working now. It wasn't earlier on. I had to push it down. Exactly the same as give or mine, isn't it? Still get the water going. So Marcus, his name's Marcus, isn't he? Nice old boy. He knows his stuff. He's got the water wheel going.
Oh yeah, the water comes down here.
Oh yeah.
What I'm doing is I've filled this troughs with sand.
Yeah.
The sand contains some tin.
Right. Oh wow, look at that.
Yeah.
So this is exactly like beautiful mine, isn't it? Yeah.
The movement of this table is not just a straight back and forward.
Right.
It's slow forward and fast back,
Right.
with the result that something heavy will tramp us uphill.
Oh wow.
It's like pulling a tablecloth from under the cutlery.
Yeah, yeah. That's
It works
clever.
like that. So heavy stuff goes uphill, and light stuff is washed downhill.
Yeah. Very clever.
What happens is it separates out the ore. The heaviest stuff goes right to the top. The middle stuff goes in the middle. That can be reprocessed
Yeah.
because it's fairly heavy.
Yeah.
This stuff is washing back and down the sluice,
Yeah.
down to the riverbed.
But
I'm not expert at this,
No.
but
I can
if
see.
if it's done perfectly,
Yeah.
all this stuff, all the light stuff goes
that way,
downhill,
yeah.
and the heavy stuff progresses uphill.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So that's
That's
the
the
dreaded,
principle, isn't it? Yeah.
the dreaded shaking tape.
Yeah.
Were you all right with this going uphill?
yeah.
Yeah. That's a good demonstration, that, isn't it? You can see it gradually going up there.
Going
doesn't
up,
it?
up, yeah.
So does that, all the heavy stuff, does that go into a separate...
The heavy stuff we catch at different levels
Right.
round the end of it as it's discharged.
Yeah, brilliant.
You have a catcher here. Catch that one, catch that one, and
Yeah.
catch that one. And so that's keep,
Yeah.
that's throw away, that's reprocess.
Right.
And the reprocess involves putting it through this ball mill over here.
Oh yeah.
You feed it into the ball mill,
Yeah.
shovel it into the ball mill,
Yeah.
and it has a load of these with it,
And that-
steel balls.
Bet that makes a bit of a noise.
It will do
A
when
bit
it's
like a
going.
cement mixer.
Yeah, a bit like a cement mixer. So you ball mill it, and that makes it into a finer slurry than you
Right.
had before.
Yeah.
And hopefully you could regain some more tin from that.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant.
So that's the ball mill.
Lots of water coming off there, look.
Oh yeah, because they stood there.
Yeah. This is fantastic, isn't it? Right, let's go and see what he's doing here. Brilliant. Bloody hell, this is a bit better than to get the demonstration, don't it?
Yeah.
Makes a bit of a shindy, doesn't it?
Whoever wired this up put all the switches in the wrong place.
It's always the way, isn't it?
That's what you have to do along the
You have to go running around.
Over there, just do that.
Yeah.
And over here, just
Mine's. Right. They're just switching off. They're just switching everything off. Amazing. Amazing, isn't it? It's all the water comes down here as well.
Excess water comes down.
Right, when we've got the timelines, we can do two things with them. What we've got to deal with those is we've got to deal with them slowly.
Right, okay.
And one of the things that they invented in Cornwall was the round frame in which the sand and the gravel and the water were introduced round this perimeter of this rotating sloping table. The chap in charge of it could regulate the flow onto the table. When it was wet, there had been no gaps, it would all been nicely expanded.
Yeah.
And the brushing device would be in contact with the cake that formed on the surface of this very slowly rotating slope.
Right.
Again, the light stuff would be washed off the bottom, the heavy stuff would collect up the slope. And so you'd run this for days,
Yeah.
and it would gradually fill up. There would be lots and lots and lots of them. Here's a photograph inside a mill, a commercial mill, where there are 1, 2, 3, 4,
Wow.
5, 6. There are, you know, they
Just
go
mass
into, they go
production
into
there.
the distance.
Yeah.
The students would have had one to play with.
Right.
That's enough for them to learn. They're all the same.
Yeah.
So that gets you your Cornish round frame. That's slowly driven. The bed of the thing is simply suspended from the shaft in the middle.
Right.
It can rock.
Oh, Christ, yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It's simply suspended from the
So
top.
it's just suspended from the top and the centre
Just
bit.
suspended from the top.
Wow.
And at the end of the shift, they go in with shovels, take off the concentric circles, the best, the not quite so good,
Yeah.
and so on, and the not quite so good will be sent back to the ball mill
Yeah, for another
to
go.
make it finer still.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Brilliant.
other way that they did it in the early days, a puddle, which is much the same thing, only you feed it from the middle. The sand and the mineral and the water go into the central distributor bucket. The steep cone catches the heaviest stuff. The shallow cone catches the middle stuff, and the rubbish goes to the outside edge. And they had lots and lots of these in Cornwall. They were very often horse-driven, or even probably driven by people power.
Yeah.
But they were one of the old ways of doing it. It was slow. You had to go through it time and time and time again, reprocessing. It was very, very labour intensive. But in the end, you got to what you were looking for.
Yeah.
And what you wanted was your 1% of usable, 65% board.
Yeah, yeah.
Hold on, I'll just take note of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it? Yeah.
We can come around this side now. Other more recent additions is this contraption, which again does the same job as all the others. It's a very slightly sloping rubber belt. You introduce your sand and water at the top. I'll start it up.
Okay. shake the rafters a bit. He's going to shake the rafters. Bloody hell. He's going to shake the old rafters. Oh, you needed to give it a little bit of a...
Like a little round sitting on the lid.
Shush, I've got this on. I've got this on. Oh, sorry.
That does the same thing. It transports the heavy stuff up the hill.
Yeah.
The light stuff washed down it, and it shakes while it.
Yeah.
Again, this is a replica contraption built by one of our early volunteers. But this was an American business. Goodyear Rubber Company made a fortune out of the belt.
Yeah.
Again.
Have a look down that end. Yeah. Just have a look down that end.
Okay, there would have been hundreds of these. There would have been hundreds of
Oh
these.
well,
in
yeah.
a,
Again, it's
in
like
a
mass
mill.
production, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got one.
Yeah.
One for them to learn their trade, but that's what you would have.
So is this the only example of
It's the
working?
It's the only example that we know of.
Got to keep it going, haven't we?
Try and
Brilliant.
keep it going. It's a bit of a science.
Bit of persuasion, isn't it? Yeah.
Needs a little persuasion.
Yeah.
But it works and it just jiggles along
Yeah.
very slowly.
Yeah. So, as Marcus just said, it's the only working example.
Thank you.
Oh, look at this.
Now, we saw the shaking table over the far side.
Yeah.
That takes up about 10 or 12 square metres of floor. This does the same job on about a square metre. It's a spiral separator. It's a helter-skelter.
Yeah.
You put the sand and water in at the top. The light stuff gets centrifuged to the outside. The heavy stuff stays in the middle and is scooped off with these fingers here, which somebody can adjust if they know what they're doing. I can't. How long could?
Jesus, people think of these things.
There we are. You've got these various little paddles that
Yeah. Direct it, so to
use-
speak.
that you use to siphon off the heavy stuff that you want. And you could. This is an aluminium one. Nowadays they're plastic, and you can get 4 or 5 intertwined with each other.
Oh, okay.
So that you get the production of one of those
Those, yeah. But many.
in a 1 square
Suppose,
metre
yeah.
floor area, rather than 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Anyway, finally, at the end of the day, you've separated out all your rubbish from your tin bearing, your tin ore, say. You the Cornish tipped it all into the riverbed.
Oh, okay.
And down the riverbed, there were little, what they called streamworks set up, and they did the final scavenge of anything that might have been left behind. And they used these things called rake frames or rack frames. Again, there'd be fields and fields of them.
Crikey. Wow.
Yeah.
And these are quite automatic, and what they do is they shovel up the sand from the riverbed, they feed it into this contraption, feed it onto the wooden platform with a flow of water, which would wash the light mineral down and into there.
Yeah.
After a bit, it's called a flopjack mechanism, and what happens is that the trough at the back fills up with water, and I'll trigger it
Right.
by hand so that you can see what happens. It opens that and it gives you a flush.
Yeah, yeah.
It takes the heavy stuff down and flushes it away and catches it there. So any heavy stuff that's left will do that. Having let it flop, the balance tub at the front will fill up with water and it will automatically reset itself. Build one of those of rock from the mine, bearing in mind that underground it's pretty dark, you've got candle light, you can't really tell how good it is. You've said, yes, this is rock's got tin in it, but we don't know how much. So what they would do was they would manually turn that rock into sand, produce a sample and separate it by hand. And what they'd use was what's called a vanning shovel, which is this thing here, and you would put a measured sample of ore into that, or rock rather, that you've done.
Yeah.
You would do it like that and you'd swirl it round with water and let the light stuff flow off the edge. And the heavy stuff would stay behind.
Yeah.
And eventually you'd end up with a sample of the heavy stuff from the ore that you've collected.
Yeah.
To send to your laboratory to see how rich it is. And you would have started off with, let's say, 100 gram sample, and you'd end up with 2 grams. Bingo. Wow. So that would be the hand separation of ore, and they do it on one of these very flat, soft vanning shovels.
Yeah.
A bit of a film there showing Willie Loren, the chap who built that vanning machine. He was the old expert here, and he knew everything. I never met him myself.
Right.
He did the business.
Right.
Anyway,